I mean, you've had a pretty incredible run recently with genre work, starting with Longlegs and then The Monkey, now Backrooms. And who knew, or maybe you did, that this was going to take off the way it did and become such an incredible hit. But there was a time where it wasn't a hit. It was just an idea in somebody's head. And that's where I want to start. Let's go back to the beginning and how you first got connected with Kane Parsons for this project.
Sure. I got connected with Kane Parsons through producing friend, Mr. Chris Ferguson at Oddfellows / Phobos Pictures, who made Longlegs and The Monkey and Keeper and many other movies. I actually have a long history with Chris Ferguson. We go way back to making short films. Like we did a few 48-hour film festivals for Halloween. We made an independent found footage horror movie called Afflicted, which I believe came out in 2013, but we worked on for many years. So he came to me and was like, hey, I got this kid, Kane, who makes all of these movies in Blender, and like he does all this stuff in Blender, and he like has these walls and there's rooms. And I was like, what are you talking about? What's Blender? I didn't know anything about it. And then, so he's like, it's called Backrooms and there's rooms. And it's like a guy wandering through rooms. And I was like, oh, okay. And then what happens? So he's like, yeah, just check it out, see what you think. So I went and I watched all of Kane's videos, and they are quite remarkable on his YouTube channel. They are something special as far as like found footage, the style of it and everything. So I watched that, and then I met him. We did a little demo shoot before the movie happened. They had a little skeleton crew that went to one of the abandoned malls in Vancouver, and they shot a couple scenes just to kind of, test out the waters, see how things worked, workshop some scenes with some actors, and then I got to cut those scenes. So I had like a little, funny, awkward first date with Kane, cutting together a couple scenes. I think we spent maybe a couple days, a week on it, and that was sort of my intro. And then he's like, yeah, you're cool. And I was like, you're pretty cool too. And then I ended up working on the movie, so it all worked out.
Yeah, it certainly did. Well, going back to your "and then what" comment, as you said, Kane started this whole phenomenon with his YouTube series and Blender, which I'm sure we'll revisit a few times in this talk. Was there an actual pitch to you about how to envision this translation from internet creepypasta into feature-length cinematic experience?
They had a script when they were shooting quite early. I think they've been working on scripts since Kane was like 16. He turned 20 during just before the movie shot last year, which is incredible. I don't remember what I was doing when I turned 20, but it was not anything close to this. So I read the script, and it was quite fleshed out. There was a lot of things going on. There was some creatures. It wasn't just like man walks into falls into a back rooms and can't find his way out. There was obviously like the therapy. A lot of things in the early drafts were still there the whole way through. The relationship between Clark and his therapist Mary, as the sort of backbone to everything. There was a few other elements. I think the end of the movie in the original, one of the early drafts that I read, had a much more fantastical, perhaps very expensive ending that they then changed to make feasible. But it was very cool. There's still like a chase sequence at the end, going through a maze of labyrinthine backroom sets, and the sort of structure of handing over from Clark in the beginning to Mary was always kind of there. It was interesting to read, because when you read it, it doesn't necessarily capture the tone of, the Backrooms YouTube series. Like I was reading it, and I see it in my, mind's eye as a movie with actors and camera angles, and that's as they shot it. They had, they shot it traditionally at times, and there's still some found footage sections, but it did, in my mind, seem more like a movie. So a big sort of thing that we were always wondering was, well, how do we capture the essence of the YouTube series and instill that into, I guess, the sort of Hollywood version of a Backrooms story? I like to think it kind of worked, but
yeah, I think a lot of people think it kind of worked. Did he have any thoughts, Kane, that is, on what he wanted you to adhere to from the YouTube series, or ways he knew he wanted you to depart? Like, I got to admit, I haven't seen the original series. You watched it. how appreciably different is the tone and the style of the feature from the original series?
I suppose like there's found footage sections of the movie, as you know, there's quite a few. There's the sort of cold open that's about like a 5-minute sequence. There's another sequence where Clark does some research with his manager, his employees, and her boyfriend. They go down that's another sort of 10-minute section. Those are kind of classically, kind of Kane vibe. They were kind of bare. There's a lot of humming and buzzing from the fluorescent lights. The soundscape of everything is heavily distorted through the VHS, which is a large part of his, style is very like analog horror, distorted and degraded as much as possible, and conveniently at times, so you can't see what's going on. So those parts were a lot easier. I feel like in the more traditional movie areas, a big part of it was. It is. Some people have complained, and I, don't disagree. It's not a movie for everyone about the pacing. Perhaps it's a slow burn where people are moving through space quite literally in real time. But that is part of the style of Backrooms. When Clark sort of has his first encounter with the portal or the wall in the basement, he kind of falls through, and then we go through essentially in real time, which usually in other movies that I've worked on, it'd be like, okay, so character walks from point A to point B. Let's just, cut right away. Like, let's just get to the meat of the thing. Let's get to the drama. Let's get to the main point. Like, we don't need to see someone go to the door, open the door, bust out their keys, open the door, close the door behind them, and then go through. But in this movie, it's like the space is the main character. And kind of like we needed to establish what the space is, the Backrooms is, and kind of trust that the audience is going to be immersed enough in what's going on that they're not going to be like, okay, hurry up. What's going to happen next? Like the space was very beautifully designed. They built this massive set that was, I'm sure you may or may not have heard, there's like a 30,000 foot set that they built. Obviously, there's some visual effects, massaging and extensions and cleanup and such, but it's a beautiful space, and kind of like wandering through it, you kind of just want to be in it. It's not like, I suppose in a way, it's kind of like when you watch Avatar, you want to be immersed in it, and you can kind of like, yeah, let's just walk through this forest. It's kind of so beautiful, and let's experience the sounds and the textures of what's going on and discover everything. When Clark kind of goes through the first time, we kind of have that, but with like the bad version of it, where you feel bad, like maybe something weird is going to happen. And part of that too is like one of the things that he's done in his YouTube very successfully is that he'll sort of lull people into a hypnosis of like, oh, it's so long. Some of the videos are quite long. Some of them are 40 minutes long. Some of the explorations, some of them are shorter, but maybe not much happens. But by having such a long period of time where people are kind of lulled into hypnosis of like, well, what's going to happen? Is there something behind here? Oh, no. Okay. Is there something behind there? Oh, okay. No. But then when is it? The tension kind of slowly simmers over time. And then when something does happen, you're kind of jolted a little bit. So that is something that we, did keep in mind as building at least the initial sequences.
I thought I heard you say earlier on that there's sort of like a video game feel to it, and it certainly does. And Kane has cited things like Half-Life and Portal and Minecraft. You went back and watched the YouTube series. Did he give you any other references or video games to play to help you get the tone of this movie?
Not really. I know that there are Backrooms video games. That's not really his thing. And that's not actually even my thing. I'm not really a video game player. I love, Mario Kart, and I play a few games here and there, but I find like I'm more of a movie person. I have a hard time investing into it, because now it's like you want to play a game, you really got to put some time into it. It's like reading a book, like you got to invest some time. So I personally, that was not necessarily a conversation that we had about video games, but it's like a first person shooter kind of look. And there's a few shots in the movie where I remember him saying like it was just a POV shot of Clark's POV as he turns a corner, one of the first corners from what we call the furniture pyramid into the next room, and he was like, "This is my favorite shot of the movie," and I was like, "Oh, it's cool. It's really cool." But it's like it didn't really have any person in it, but it had that vibe of like a first person video game where you're immersed in it and you're turning the corner with him. So It is a beautiful shot. And I suppose also when you're, if you're Kane and you see your movie birthed into reality and you get to see the fruits of your labor as someone turns the corner and that's really there, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, at any age. And at 20, I try not to think about, like you said, what was I doing at 20? Not this. Doing some research on you and reading up on Longlegs, you had talked about restraint, about not overcutting and trusting the image and the atmosphere rather than just sort of trying to force some of those horror conventions. How do you apply that philosophy of restraint to a movie built almost entirely on liminal spaces? I mean, you must feel some sort of impetus to like, okay, these things are wide open. I got to keep things moving. I got to make things happen. I have to manufacture change when maybe you don't really need to at all.
I mean, I feel like that's something that I battle with that internally. It's like, I know, especially as an editor, when you see something over and over again, you sort of get numb to what it is. And you're like, okay, we got to do something. We got to like ramp up something here so that we can maintain attentions and like people are excited. But sometimes I think with this movie as a whole, we knew that at the end, we're going to like open the floodgates, all kinds of crazy shit's going to happen. So we kind of have to think about it as in the beginning, we can really kind of exercise restraint because we know it's going to happen eventually. The people that are into what's being shown right now will hopefully, be interested and engaged enough with what's going on. And as a whole experience, by the time they get to the end, they're going to get what they want, hopefully. So it's a funny balancing game. And I think also, when you're editing, you sort of get very focused on a thing, but I feel like the most important editing really happens once you have the whole movie there and you can kind of watch it as a whole and be like, oh, okay, now we can really dial things up because we can see the big picture. Maybe something doesn't make so much sense in the moment, but as the experience of the movie, it will deliver satisfaction at the end. As far as like restraint and pulling things, there's a couple of moments that I come to mind where Clark is venturing into the back rooms and he climbs through a tiny little tunnel and, in your mind, you're saying, don't go there. Why would you do that? It's such a tiny tunnel. He goes through, he finds another interesting room and turns around and hears a sound. Everything gets quiet. He goes up to the tunnel and he's like, hello, anyone there? And then there's a shadow movement. He sees something. As scripted, there was a big sound, and then he, has a big reaction, and then kind of leaves or runs away from the scary sound. We were playing around with that a lot, where it's like, okay, I think in the editor's cut, it was just like he sees something immediately and then runs away immediately. But we eventually landed on a thing where the first scare was like just a shadow movement and nothing. There's no sting. There's nothing there. And it kind of has like a exponential, I'd like to think, kind of reactions. If you have a sort of soft first hit and then a follow through jab, the 1-2 punch, the first one is nothing. And then senses are heightened. And then you can wallop someone with the big thing, which again, in this moment wasn't necessarily a scary thing. It was just a louder noise and a cardboard cutout flying past the frame. But it did get a pretty good reaction in the theater. Moments like those, I feel like, work best when there's so much tension coming, and then the first thing is a little bit kind of disappointing.
You come in bringing a wealth of experience across scripted and unscripted of various forms. How is the dynamic working with him? I understand that every director, every person is going to be different, but working with a seasoned feature director versus the kind of energy and eyes wide open aspect that he brings to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start by saying I was telling my mom this, and I don't feel like an old person, but I've been editing movies since before Kane was born, which is a funny thing to think about. But he's a very smart young man. I think initially in my first meetings, I was like, oh, he's just a kid. He's like, does he know anything? What's he like? And of course, it turns out he's quite a very smart incredible young person, very talented, learns extremely quickly, knows a lot about what he's doing, and is extremely driven. So, working with him, at no point, maybe past the initial meeting, was I ever like, this guy's so young. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He knows what he's talking about. And one of the things that was very interesting was that, like, just by nature of being older, I've seen more movies than him. And and the things he's seen, he likes a lot. Like, he hasn't necessarily watched like a lot of movies. The whole time I was like, oh, you gotta see Brazil. There's like a big giant guy, and there's like some liminal space. And also, coming from YouTube, the way that we'd approach things would be like, he'd always question things. He'd be like, well, why does it gotta be that way? And I'll be like, well, because it's a movie. And then I'd be like, well, yeah, why? I don't know. Like, maybe we don't have to do that. So his kind of fresh take on everything was like, well, why did he question everything? Like, well, why does it have to be that way? And it really kind of made me question if we did have to follow certain conventions within the movie.
I think the success of this movie is actually challenging a lot of preconceived notions about filmmaking, and we'll see where it all leads. You had cited somebody else in terms of your connection to the project. I had a note about Osgood Perkins because it seems like you're working with a lot of the same people from that universe. So it's a new experience with Kane, but you have some familiar names and faces that are working with you on this project. Did that help get things moving on the right foot and quickly because you had some familiar colleagues with you?
Well, yes. So Oz Perkins, the director of Longlegs and The Monkey and many other great movies, he came on as a producer, and I can't remember. Like, I believe he's an executive producer. The movie is a Phobos picture, which he's a part of, and he served as a little bit of a directing mentor for Kane, and was always available to like ask questions, like to help with anything that might come up. And certainly working with the same group of people, it's our little film family up here in Vancouver, which we've been, on a bit of a streak, which I'm very happy about. But like, it's a well-oiled machine of everybody that works on these projects, and everybody is familiar. And there's something kind of wonderful about that. Like, when working with the same producers or like the same, even the crew, like, I know a bunch of people. My dog has her best friend is like the set dresser's dog. They have like a little office dog romance. There's like stuff going on that, that kind of just enriches the community of the filmmaking, which makes the whole thing a lot more enjoyable. Knowing that some people, move from project to project. There's some new faces here and there. Our post team was, a lot of the same figures. Our post producer, post supervisor, Andy Levine, worked with for years and years and years. Also has worked with Chris Ferguson and Oddfellows for a long time. My assistant editor, Stephen Grobe, worked with for so long. I can't even remember when we really met, but it's like he was always there. Our VFX supervisor, Ed Douglas, had been working on, I think we started working together on Longlegs, and we get along great. So having everybody around. Also, sorry, another couple more shout outs. There's Eugenio Battaglia, our sound designer, sound mixer. We've worked with on many movies, some documentaries. I think I've worked with him even way back. And our co-composer, Ado Van Bremen. So everybody is kind of within this family, and I have, everybody on my phone. I can talk to them. We can sort of commiserate. We can like go out, have beer. And it is a pretty cool thing that we have going. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but it's wonderful to have a film family. That's where I was getting at.
It is. You have a film family in Vancouver because you're based in Vancouver. The film was shot in Vancouver. So it's safe to assume you were cutting in Vancouver. But the question is, or is it? We should establish that right away. You were cutting in Vancouver?
We were cutting in Vancouver. Yeah, it's we were in this. You may not see this on the podcast, but I'll describe the room. The art department came into the edit suite and put up the yellow wallpaper before Kane came in to join me in the edit, and that was quite fun. So we had a bit of a method editing edit suite where we were in the back rooms for the edit.
Did you ever cut on set, either due to the nature of how complicated the set geography was, or whether it's to be there for a first-time feature director, Or do you prefer to be away from all that so you can be as impartial as possible in your approach to the footage?
I've been on set a couple times, and that was fun, but I think I prefer the objectivity that comes with not being a part of the set. To be away from everything is, you just have like zero attachment to what was going on. I did go to a set one day because they had, I think it was Renata's last day, and they were celebrating with us. I believe she bought the crew mini donuts, and I was like, we got to go. So we popped into set, and it was incredible to be there. Obviously, like the hard work of everybody, and to be in the set when I was like looking at it on the screen, like it's actually quite large. It's very big. So that was cool, but I was cutting away from set. We moved into this office only for the director's cut. Before that, we were at Picture Shop Vancouver, and I was working there with Steve, the assistant editor, in the beginning for the duration of production. I would be sending scenes to Kane as they became assembled so that he could have a look at what's going on. He didn't give a lot of feedback during the week because he was being pulled in a million directions. But I did speak with them about that. It was nice that they were happy to receive the scenes, to be like, oh, good, what we did yesterday, it's working. All right. And so Kane did come by on the weekends to kind of check in on things and look at how things were going. And then, yeah, we kind of moved on from there.
So once you do your first assembly, where's the first place you start in terms of the editorial challenges? Are you focusing on story, tone, sorting out the geography of this crazy place, or all the above, something else?
You know, the first few things that we discussed once watching the movie was sort of the bigger picture. I feel like, I mean, it's nice to start with an easy challenge, like let's fix this one thing and check it off the list and kind of move along. But I can't really remember exactly where we began, but I feel like our first few problems, our challenges, were kind of balancing the movie with the characters, because it does, like I was mentioning earlier, it has a bit of a character shift at the midpoint to, it suddenly becomes Mary the therapist story, which in our movie, it felt like things were slightly imbalanced in the beginning. If she's going to emerge as our hero at the end, we kind of need to tweak things ever so slightly so that she is sitting on equal footing with Clark in the beginning. So we did have to jostle things around a bit to make that happen. And obviously the movement of scenes in certain ways causes rippling consequences. There was a few times we had to change the color of Clark's shirt to match a certain day to put him in the intro. We brought the handprint earlier so that Mary could be established as our central figure. That was sort of our first thing that we kind of zoned in on. And then there was also a lot of question mark areas, or some transitions between scenes. Mary gets choked out by Clark. Oh, sorry, spoiler alert. She sort of gets choked out, and then there was a transitional scene, somewhat of a dream sequence, which took place in a liminal space, you could say, which eventually became, this is an interesting story. She gets choked out, and then she has a flashback, and then we are with her, and the flashback transitions to, if the camera kind of floats through the floor, and the room that the young Mary is in slowly devolves into a Backrooms kind of dungeon. Now, the way that came about was pretty interesting, because I would be, editing here, and Kane he had his own little space with his very powerful Blender super laptop. And, sometimes when I would be editing or tinkering with some stuff, he would be over there either making some kind of music or building some sequences or designing some of the handycam sequences just over there. And it was pretty amazing because, also there was a certain part. Sorry, I'm like a lot of tangents here, but
okay.
There's a certain part where he would be like, "Oh, we could just make a shot." He has Blender; he could just make a shot. We don't have a shot; he could make it. And there was a few times where he were experimenting with do we need a new handprint shot? Could he do that? And he would just build it, and we'd put it into the edit and be like, "Yeah, that kind of works. Do we need it? Does it work? Does it play?" what else can you build us? But the sort of descent shot, which we ended up calling it, I believe, and my interpretation of this may be different from his, but he wanted to change like some of the shape of the room to, be a slightly different. He's very specific in his architectural design and layout of things, which is crazy because, again, he's 20. But he was building certain versions of that, and it's like he was iterating. Like he repurposed the room, redesigned the room in Blender, and then kind of stacked, like copied it and pasted it. Another one to kind of like tweak something, and then like somehow it built like this sort of Jenga tower of versions of the room. And I was like, oh, well, what if I, fly the camera through them? That's kind of neat. And he showed me, and I'd be like, that's so cool. What do we do with that? Let's put that in the movie somewhere. And lo and behold, that did become the first teaser of the movie, which was pretty amazing. He just kind of whipped that up.
Did anything he made end up in the final film?
Yes, I mean he worked with because he's wearing a lot of hats in this project. He would just sort of begin like he would establish some spaces. He would build some things in Blender, and he handed them off to the visual effects team to kind of carry the rest of the way. He's very specific about the sort of VHS look of everything. We had a very elaborate process pipeline for the VHS found footage sections. They were all shot, I believe, Jeremy Cox, the amazing director of photography, shot all of that, I think, on the red Komodo. So the VHS sections originated in 8K Komodo, and then we degraded the hell out of them. They needed to be high res so that visual effects could do their high res kind of work on them, but high res enough that it would just like still be acceptable within VHS distortion. And then they piped that stuff through a VHS kind of literal, like they made it analog and then captured it back in again and then blew it back up to 4K so that it would, match the aesthetic of the movie. That was kind of a fun thing. You start with really high res and then you kind of shitify it and then you blow it back up and it looks really cool.
Going in the other direction, did anything that he made in Blender function as any sort of previs for you? Were you able to use any of his early renderings that ultimately were used for production, for building the sets, but could it help you at all in editorial?
Yeah, the whole opening sequence he designed in Blender, the sort of cold open of it, was a majority in Blender, which I got to use for the edit. Changed a few things changed here and there. The bird that you see in the movie is a seagull. It used to be a duck. But it was, I think that was because that was the Blender asset that was there, but it was always intended to be a seagull for the final. The timing of that was there, the sort of space, the layout of everything was there, but it did change a little bit. But for the edit, we did have that to work with. There was a section of some transitional scenes that he had made to get us through the backrooms after Bobby goes missing. I had to play with. And then he would even do some, like, there was some, because it was shot in Vancouver, and Vancouver does not look like San Jose, where the movie is placed. He also did some, like, sky replacement, added some palm trees. He got right in there.
Well, the movie's meant to feel unnervingly intimate. Still makes me wonder how many cameras he shot with and the kind of coverage you were getting.
It was a single camera shoot, even for the stunts. There was only one camera, which worked out very well. The coverage was pretty good. They had, first of all, again, another shout out to the performers. Renata and Chiwetel were super great to work with. Everything that they were giving was amazing. Our biggest scene was the kitchen sequence, which where they kind of have their showdown in the Backrooms kitchen at the table. And I think that scene is it's 12 or 13 minutes long. Essentially, two people sitting at a kitchen table. A lot of crazy shit happens. But that sequence, it was, I think they shot from, 1669A to 69AZ, however many setups that is. I know there's no I's or O's or something. But that was a monster sequence. Also, shout out to Avid Media composer and Stephen Grubb, who spent a very long time mapping that whole sequence out in ScriptSync. God bless him. It was a work of art. Every single iteration of every line, every sort of improv, every change denoted in this wonderful ScriptSync bin, which helped us get through that very quickly. All the work that the assistant editors do in the beginning pays off immensely at the end. I just want to say that thank you, assistant editors, for your hard work.
When you're sorting through mountains of footage of essentially identical looking yellow hallways, how do you group those things to sort of make sense of the madness?
Probably it's a little more forgiving than like if we had shot it on location or something, because like we could repurpose certain areas by flipping them around, by making certain tweaks to things. The continuity of everywhere has the yellow wallpaper and yellow carpet at times allowed for more freedom in movement. And the lighting was consistently the same. So I don't think we did anything in particular to sort of denote this yellow wallpaper from that yellow wallpaper, because we always knew there was. And I think after a certain amount of time watching the footage, I got pretty familiar with the set and the sort of spaces that they were in. So we didn't necessarily, we just kind of know by looking at it. And of course, Kane knew every inch of it and the height of the electrical outlets and the separate, the width between the fluorescents and the spacing of everything. So,
and if something doesn't match, Kane will just make it in Blender.
Yeah, it's true.
We had talked about this earlier, the notion of the pacing of the film compared to something you would traditionally see on YouTube. I mean, there's been a lot of talk recently about the streamers and being really intentional in over contextualizing things for the audience and making things move quickly and repeating data points over and over again so they don't get lost, especially in this dual screen viewing experience that people seem to participate in these days. Sounds like you and Kane as well didn't really have that problem. Like you were pretty comfortable with the slow burn, as you said. Anybody else that weighed in, try and push you in that direction of like, no, these modern audiences, you got to speed things along?
Yeah, this is kind of like slow cinema, like slow horror cinema, I suppose. There's, and like I said, part of the YouTube is about the slowness of it, about lulling into hypnosis. And there's something kind of like, it just feels different because it is slower and it's like you're really there because it's unfolding before your eyes. It's like a sort of a verite scene in a documentary where like, oh, this is kind of really happening. We're really in it. Why are we spending so much time in this? Something must be important. Also, going through this whole thing was that Kane has like a Discord server. He's very kind of in tune with like his audience, his fans, and like while we are making this movie for, I suppose, a wider audience, he always was sort of considering the expectations of people that are really into this project and the idea of the Backrooms. So he definitely wanted to treat the audience like they're very smart. He is very smart himself. A lot of people that love Backrooms are very smart people that obsess over a lot of very small details. They want to figure out a puzzle. They want to see the Backrooms. They want to get involved in what's going on. They want to decipher what's happening and, sort of engage themselves mentally in what's going on. So we always have to treat the audience like they are smart and engaged. There's obviously, fears on like if we bring this out to the world, will a general audience feel the same way? Are they going to be like, yes, people that love the Backrooms and love Kane stuff are going to be excited about it, but will everybody kind of resonate with that? And I think, we just had to kind of trust the process and what Kane has been doing. Like you look at his YouTube, he has a bajillion hits on all his videos. Like clearly he's doing something right. We did have like, obviously there's notes that it would always come down like, is this working? Is it fast enough? Or is there enough going on? I believe, we had a couple test screenings, I think. It scored okay for the movie. And so then everyone, I think, was like, okay. So it's kind of working. Let's kind of massage it a little more, like, do we need to do that? And then I think when the Descent teaser came and got released, and that got a bajillion views in the first however many hours, then everyone's like, okay, he's doing the right thing. Like, let's people are gonna watch this movie, they're gonna be into it. So we really had to kind of trust the process and what he was doing, because people kind of want to see it. I don't know. It's a strange thing. It goes against kind of your instinct to be like, okay, faster, faster, faster. But it is by when everything is so fast, when suddenly something is slow, it's like, well, that stands out weirdly.
It certainly does. And you brought up wider audiences. I want to talk about wide shots because I wonder if wide shots are more important in a liminal space environment, because it felt like there were a lot of wide shots in this film. How does that affect the way you cut, having to work with so many wide shots?
Yeah, they shot very wide. In the Backrooms, I can't remember what lens they were using. This is all Jeremy's sort of forte. That was like a 14, extremely wide lens. There's a shot just before Mary comes through in the wall in the lower levels of the furniture store, and her hand gets very close to the camera, and it is huge. The distortion, like when you're close to the camera, her hand was massive. But when they were, I think the sort of visual language of it was when they were in the real world, things were a little kind of closer, maybe more portraiture. And then when they got into the Backrooms, everything was super wide, so you would see everything. There is in the sequence when Mary is being pursued by the pirate Clark, there is, I remember cutting that together. The first is kind of like a little bit of a Western where there's like a showdown, and the she's running away, and then she realizes that pirate Clark is behind her, but he's far away behind her. And the first shot, she turns around and she looks, and it's this vista of the furniture store where you see everything. And the giant pirate is actually quite small and very far away. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's cool. It's like, are people going to like register that he's there? And then I remember I showed that to Kane, and he was like, yes, this is amazing. This is so cool. And I was like, oh yeah. He's so tiny and so far away, and you see everything. It kind of is counterintuitive to what you would normally expect, where like you sort of crash zoom or what have you. I don't know. Like, do you get really close to show how gigantic the guy is? But it's kind of the opposite, where the camera is so wide that you see how far away and small he is. He's kind of like, it's not about the guy. It's kind of like the Backrooms space that you're sort of taking it all in. And then when the moment he's very still and he starts to move, your eye suddenly tracks the movement of, oh, there he is. There's his big hat. Yeah, it was very, I don't know. It's interesting to cut with. I think like you have to be a little more geographically aware when cutting between extremely wide shots than you do. Like you can cheat so much in a close up. Like you can cheat distance, you can cheat emotions, you can cheat all. Like you don't have to worry about people's feet. But I think this is of all the movies I've worked on, I've never been so considerate of the rhythm of someone's feet or their breathing, because you see, like if you're cutting from one wide angle to then the profile kind of wider angle, there has to be some kind of, there doesn't have to be, but in this movie we're sticking to the continuity of rhythm and motion because they're really there.
So in support of that geographic awareness, as you called it, Clark actually has a map of the Backrooms that he drew based on who knows how many times he visited that world. We didn't see it, but you can assume based on the detail of the map, he's been down there a bunch. Did he give you a copy? Because I think a major challenge for you would be maintaining the spatial logic for the audience within this 30,000 square feet of practical sets.
Yeah, he didn't give me that, but I did have a screenshot of that. I believe that Kane drew that himself. A lot of the artwork that is in the movie, like the mural that's in the wall when Mary finds Clark, Kane, did himself. He did a lot of that kind of stuff. Like he is meticulous in that way. Things are very specific. Yeah, I did not have a sort of a map. It's kind of like a fantasy. You open a fantasy book and here's the map of the places you need to know. But I did have a pretty good sense of what was going on. Part of it too is like in my mind, I kind of didn't necessarily want to know specifically, because what if we needed to adjust something? Like I didn't want to be too, well, we can't turn this corner because it wouldn't make sense. It'd just be like, does it emotionally make sense? Can we repurpose a thing? There's one shot that we repurposed with Mary coming through a door, And it was supposed to be earlier in the geography of the space. And then we're like, but it could be any door. All the doors kind of look the same. So why don't we just kind of move it a little bit later and be like, oh, this is a new door. And I think, because Kane was there on set, he sees it as what it is. It's the thing. But then when you really think about it, it could be any door in any particular spot of the Backrooms. But so we did that in a few spots.
A liminal space environment, you would think, doesn't really lend itself to montages. And I'm trying to remember, I think there was only one that I can really recall, sort of the window within self-help audiobook montage. Clark's listening to the audiobook in his car.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost in a way sort of a preamble to the film really going off the rails. Was that something that was scripted, or did you find that in the editing room as like, hey, this is a place where we can tighten things up that aren't within the Backrooms environment?
It was scripted for sure, but kind of in its inverse form. We did sort of flip it around. As I mentioned earlier, trying to balance out the characters by having Mary and Clark be a little more on equal planes in the beginning. The montage was sort of intended as the introduction to therapy, but we then flipped it and kind of took the therapy to sort of tell a story of the kind of the struggles of the two characters that they're kind of going through, and to emphasize the self-help nature of the tapes. So it was, I think that it was really intended to segue into a therapy. Instead, it became a scene where Clark is trying to glean some kind of help off of Mary's audio cassettes, which was something like the words were always kind of there, but then it became, she has a self-help tape, which was part of the aesthetic of the movie. It's like all this analog media. She's got a thing. She's watching herself on late night TV. He's watching late night TV. They have like this audio cassette. He's a furniture salesman. She's a psychology salesperson. like everyone kind of has these similar themes of like, we're, out there, but we're also kind of alone.
Since we're talking about character development and putting them on somewhat equal footing, let's talk about Clark and setting him up as having anger and drinking problems. Is the intent to have the audience feel that he's kind of an unreliable narrator, that maybe what he's experiencing isn't reality?
That sort of idea that the space, is it being imagined? Is it being remembered? Is the reality, like whose perspective are we in? Isn't really something that we sort of honed in on with Clark. That becomes more of a Mary thing, where towards the end of the movie, you start to think, well, Clark comes forward and presents the ideas of memory and the Backrooms, misremembering places. And up until that point, you're like, this really happened. He fell through the wall and this is really there. We were there. We saw it with him. And then as the movie kind of evolves, then it kind of, these ideas kind of get emphasized with like, loops. Are you in a loop? There's some flashbacks. Things get a little more dreamier. And then as we kind of go through at the very end, the final image of the movie, spoiler alert, there's a what we call the still life Mary, which suddenly is like, what is that trying to say? Are we trying to suggest that is she misremembering? Did this thing really happen? She's the psychologist. Once you get into the sort of psychological thinking of it and her ideas, then like that kind of starts to emerge. So we didn't think too much about Clark's, was what he experiencing real? Was it not? He was always kind of a grounded character, but Mary's character kind of was the one that kind of elevates the idea of the movie to like, oh, is this really happening? Is this, whose memory is this? Did she think it? We don't answer that. And part of that is the beauty of the movie, that it leaves it up for interpretation. So hopefully when you go home, you'll be like, what the heck happened?
I definitely did that, Greg. I definitely did that. Well, so you have Clark and you have Mary, and then very few other characters in the movie. You have Kat and Bobby. We talked about just developing Mary and Clark. Was there ever more to Kat and Bobby? I mean, was there a challenge of how long do we really need to have them there to care about how their situation unfolds? Or does that even matter?
They were always as they were. I think maybe they had a couple more jokes. Maybe when Clark was they're shooting Clark's infomercial, and there may have been a few more jokes that happened. But ultimately, that they were who they were, and they kind of served their purpose. I love them a lot. There was an interesting process when we get into the sort of found footage section where Captain Bobby and Clark go exploring in the back rooms, and a large part of that, there's some of it that was shot live action with the actors, and then a section of it that was made in Blender. And when we had that in the edit, we would discover that there was large sections of the movie of that found footage area that didn't have like a lot sort of going on. So Kane, using this very microphone I'm speaking into right now, did some VO, pretended to acted like Bobby, did Bobby's reactions, essentially just to kind of fill the air of like what's going on during their exploration. But a lot of that sort of the behind the camera audio was sort of flushed out a lot of their character development, which is weird to say, but that is a thing that happened. Like you don't see him necessarily in front of the camera, but you hear him behind the camera, and that kind of gives you a lot of who he is. Some of my favorite line, one of them is when they first get to the lower levels, Kat and Bobby, because I believe the camera operator was actually holding the camera. There was a little bit of a mirror trick where it looks like Bobby's actually holding the camera. He is holding a camera, but not the camera. And he goes around and he's like, "Oh, what's all this about? You got some ropes here. What's that for?" And he's like, "It's for, we're going to tie ourselves up." And then Bobby's like, "Oh, kinky." Like that line, I don't think was in the script, but we were kind of laughing about it in the edit suite and put that in, and that becomes part of who he is as a character. So like some of those little lines that we kind of put in, kind of, you get a lot of mileage out of them, I feel like. And there's some more jokes about, he goes in and he's like, "Are you high?" "I'm not high." And then there's some lines where he's acting high, and that kind of helps with, falling in love with those guys before their ultimate demise. Spoiler alert.
Well, along the lines of found footage, I'm wondering, that cheesy sci-fi show movie that Clark is watching, is that a real thing, or was that made for this film?
That's a real movie. I believe it's called Santa Claus versus the Martians. It's a strange, esoteric 1960s sci-fi movie, and also it's shout outs to our additional editor Nicholas Mansour, who came on board for a short while, who has edited many great movies such as Nope and The Nickel Boys, also a first-person movie. That was one of his ideas that he brought to the table. Like I think at one point we had Clark watching architectural videos from the National Film Board of Canada, which I have a soft spot for. But it was a little too on the nose, like the architect watching architecture. And then it became more like, is the stuff that he's watching, does it suggest more that he's living in a fantasy world? So Nick dug up this hilarious video, which you can license on Getty Images, called Santa Claus versus the Martians, which is very ridiculous.
I'll be looking for that.
Yeah, check it out.
Thanks for the tip, Greg. VFX supervisor Ed Douglas was talking about how when you and Kane were looking at the footage together, that there were edit-driven VFX ideas that actually emerged. Can you give me an example of any VFX concept that was born entirely in your timeline?
There's tons of stuff, but I'm just trying to come up with a tangible thing here. Like certainly we did a lot of split screens and kind of like retiming of things. There was one moment where, we were playing around with Mary getting the message from Clark on their answering machine. Her reaction from a different scene played better for the reaction that she was giving in, she had a slightly better reaction from the bedroom than from the answering machine. So we're like, well, can we move this here? And so I was just like, let's just see. So I kind of like crudely rotoed it out, and then I started to get a little fussy with like, oh, maybe I can do a extract matte to get the hairs out, and then it looked pretty good. My temp, I felt pretty good about my temp, and I showed it to Ed, and Ed's like, oh, okay, we can do that.
We'll take it from here.
Yeah, there were certainly other things that emerged. In the flashback that Mary has with her mom, she's sort of home alone. She goes to open the window, and then her mom, we have a cheap scare that I quite like, where the mom comes in and is like, Mary!
Yeah, that was a good one. That worked.
Yeah, I love a cheap scare. But it's a good moment in the movie. And then they look to the doorway, and we were like, well, what if that is like what do you call it? An excavator comes and crashes through, kind of calling back to the beginning of the movie where her childhood home is being demolished. So Ed and his team made that happen for us.
Okay, so there's the VFX aspect of it, but anyone who knows the Backrooms lore knows the soundscape is every bit a part of the aesthetic as the wallpaper and the carpet. You have this constant maddening hum of fluorescent lights. It's essentially a main character in and of itself. Something as simple as fluorescent lights humming. Tell me about introducing that and also managing that in the cutting room. Is that something you just mute that track the entire time because it's making you nuts?
So in the editor's cut, I had, my sound effects libraries. I had a variety of humming and buzzing, and that was in there. And I think one of the very first things that happened when Kane came in, or maybe even maybe it was for the demo shoot, but he gave me a hum. He's like, "This is the hum." And I'm like, oh, okay, that's the hum. So we have it's a very specific hum buzz of the fluorescence that is in the Backrooms that he quite likes. I think it may even be something that he recorded. I actually don't know where it came from. But the humming and buzzing and the ambience of everything was very important. I think there was always a bed of some kind of humming and buzzing. And that I feel like at a certain point in time, there'd be moments where we'd start to fixate on like the ambience of a thing needs to be a certain way, and then we'd be like, okay, wait, let's slow down here. We can leave this for Huge, our sound designer, and he will make this all glorious. We don't every time like the perspective of the thing needs to change every time that they go to a different thing. It's very important that the ambience is changing, but within the edit, I was like, we can't let's not focus on it because otherwise we'll lose sight of the story. If we start to polish all these things too much, we're going to get lost in the polish and start to forget about the movie, which is where we're trying to focus our efforts. So as important as it is to polish things to make it a viewable experience, even in like the rough cut or the editor's cut or the producer's cut or whatever, we have to sometimes let go of those things to be like, let's focus on the movie as a whole, the story. Everything is important. The music is important. The specific buzz and the perspective that you get from it is important. But during the edit, we'd have to sort of stand back and be like, okay, just imagine that's going to be great. We did edit a lot, as I'm sure many other people do, mute, to be like, okay, we just imagine perfect audio in this moment. Can we just watch through it and does it make sense? So, that was one thing that we did. But, Huge did give us a lot of sound to kind of work with for the design, the ambience. There was... at one point in time, there were discussions over what does Pirate Clark sound like? What does the still life sound like? Kane himself wanted to do the sound. He, I think, went a little hoarse doing the sound for the Pirate Clark, which was kind of like a choking, kind of dry, rubber-throated, weird sound pitched up and down. At one point in time, I believe Huge, who has a young baby right now, recorded his baby crying at a very high sample rate and then slowed that down quite a bit. So it sounded like a giant baby. I don't think that made it into the final, but we did hear it and it was pretty freaky sound that he had.
Well, further supporting the Kane does a little bit of everything notion, he also co-composed the score and has done compositions for previous projects of his. How does having the director, sort of along the same lines of the fact that he's over there in the corner just burning away on Blender to fix things for you or show you ideas, having the director be one of the composers. How does that change the process for you?
Yeah, that is. I mean, he's very talented. He had obviously a library of music and sounds. He would always play in FL Studio, which I believe used to be called Fruity Loops, which at a certain point in time before that, I believe, had another name, which I remember when I was 20 using an early version of, and I was like, oh, you're using FL Studio? What's that? And then I Wikipedia'd it, and I went back and was like, oh, that's that. I played with that when I was a youth. It was wonderful having him here. His music taste is it's like crazy. He likes, I can't remember the name of the composer exact, Cristobal Vander, I can't remember. He was the composer on White Lotus and I believe Utopia, and those were some scores that Kane really liked. They're very kind of noisy, kind of abrasive, glitchy kind of soundtracks, which is nice to kind of, we used a lot of temp in the movie, tried to use a lot of that stuff, but also certain things we kind of used maybe more traditional score to build the movie and the sort of rhythm and structure of the beats, which then when Kane and Ado came to start composing, they could really kind of dial that up. I believe Ado started composing stuff before Kane came into the room because Kane was being pulled in 1,000 directions, and Ado had a bit of a head start. And Ado did send us some tracks to work with that Kane would like, yeah or nay. Kane would also sometimes go and jam with Ado some nights, and they would go all night long playing with alto saxophones and strange synthesizers, and then arrive in the morning with a library of bizarre sounds, which we put into the movie. So that was pretty special, kind of fun thing. We also have to, again, like trying to keep in mind that like we need to make the movie work. We can't fixate too much on the music because we have to sort of make sure we get this working before we can kind of put the icing on the cake, even though the icing on the cake sometimes is the main point,
Yeah, sometimes it is. Well, this is the kind of movie, and maybe this question just ends in a massive dead end, but the kind of movie that almost begs for questions about Easter eggs. I think I noticed around the Backrooms opening, it's sort of reminiscent, the outline they did of it is from the famous Twilight Zone Little Girl Lost episode, which is probably one of the first explorations of somebody sort of disappearing into some kind of Backrooms environment. And things like Clark is wearing a t-shirt that says Modernist Design Forum, Santa Cruz, 1970, which could be just help establish, hey, architect of this certain age. I'm here to ask you, Greg, what are some of the Easter eggs in the film, if there are any?
Oh, there's so many. I don't even know the answer to, like, I'm sure there's a lot that I don't even know. I know some of the editing Easter eggs, some of the things that are in there, but, I can neither confirm nor deny. I'm sure there's a wealth of things that are up for interpretation that I can't provide the answers to. I think that's part of the delight of the movie.
Well, Backrooms presents this very immersive experience. Editing itself is a very immersive experience. It's not the kind of thing you can leave behind when you walk out the door at night. Like when you're working on a story, any kind of story, it just stays with you. After staring at those fluorescent lights and endless yellow corridors for months on end, did you experience any weird dreams or real life paranoia outside of the cutting room?
Not really. It's like if you're whatever, a brain surgeon or some kind of, how the sausage is made. You see all the pieces. I think if anything, I dreamed more about not the movie itself, but going to work. I would sometimes dream about going to work because I'd just be here all the time. But I wouldn't have a bad dream. It was just like, oh, I was working. Like, this is my life. I kind of work on movies, and I'm dreaming about working. But yeah, no, I didn't affect me in that way, negatively.
You're obviously a more grounded person than I am, which is not a big revelation. You went into this wondering, like, who's going to like this? Well, maybe it doesn't matter because I really like it. Well, it turns out a lot of people liked it, and I liked it. And I want to thank you for making it and for doing this today. And more importantly, I want to thank you for validating something that I always knew, which is that furniture stores are really creepy.
That's true. Thank you so much, Matt.